All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring the fascinating science behind why we sometimes feel completely surrounded by, well, blockheads. We're going to unpack the underlying logic of human behavior using a framework that will absolutely change how you view your coworkers, your family, and yeah, probably even yourself.
So, we all know that universal, incredibly annoying frustration of trying to communicate with someone who just doesn't get it. You explain something perfectly, clear as day, and they just stare back at you like you're speaking an alien language. It totally makes you wonder who the real idiot is, right? When we're young, we tend to keep it simple. The people who understand us are the sensible ones, and everyone else, they're just messed up. But, as we'll see, that assumption is a massive barrier to actually getting your point across.
To really picture this, think about a guy named Stuart from our sources. Stuart was an entrepreneur in his 60s, super respected in his field. But he was a boss so infamously difficult that his staff literally installed a traffic light outside his office. No joke. A warming light right above the reception desk went red when he was in the building and green when he was gone. People would actually check the light before deciding if it was safe to walk in. Stuart genuinely believed his entire organization was staffed by idiots, completely missing the fact that his definition of idiocy was just anyone who didn't think or act exactly like him.
As the psychoanalyst Carl Jung pointed out, we constantly judge each other based on actions without understanding the underlying logic. We see what people do, but we totally miss the why. We evaluate their behavior through our own personal lens, which is incredibly dangerous. Why? Because human beings are messy. We aren't simple spreadsheets. Every single interaction is shaped by our unique biases and frameworks.
So, here is the golden rule of this entire explainer. If you take away one thing today, make it this. Everything you say is filtered through the listener's biases, not yours. You actually have very little control over what your listener ultimately understands. It really doesn't matter how logical you think you're being. Your message is going to be processed through their unique personal filter, their preconceived ideas, and their specific frames of reference.
You might have perfectly clear, pure intentions, but what actually matters is how their specific behavioral filter interprets your message. This is exactly why flexibility is so absolutely crucial. As an individual, no matter how you behave, you are always in the minority. The vast majority of people around you will function differently than you do. You can't just communicate based on what works for you, you have to adapt to how others need to be spoken to.
Which brings us to a big question. Why are our behavioral filters so widely different in the first place? Where does all this come from? Well, it's formed by a complex mix of genetics and childhood environment. Even before we're born, our temperament and character traits are already taking shape at a genetic level. And then, boom, we're born and our environment kicks in. As kids, we learn by imitating the behaviors around us, slowly transforming all that uninhibited, wild childhood spontaneity into complex, structured personalities.
Human psychology actually maps out in distinct layers, working from the inside out. Understanding this inner architecture is basically the cheat code to figuring out why people act the way they do. Our behavior isn't just some flat surface, it is deeply, deeply layered.
Let's see how this builds. Right down in the center, we have our core values. These are deeply embedded and basically impossible to change. They're the rules you learned as a kid, like fighting is wrong or everyone is equal. Then, the next layer out is attitudes, which are formed by your experiences. For instance, our sources mention a woman who believed 85% of salespeople were straight-up swindlers. Because of that deep mistrust, she endlessly returned furniture and cars. Together, core values and attitudes create your core behavior. That's how you act when you're totally comfortable and free from outside pressure. But the outermost layer, the one everyone actually sees, that's your moderated behavior. It's the mask you wear to fit into specific situations, like being at the office or sitting through a tense family dinner.
It all boils down to this scientific formula. Behavior is a function of personality multiplied by surrounding factors. So, the behavior we actually observe is the result of who a person is on the inside, interacting with the environment on the outside. We're continually affecting one another, and the real trick to communication is figuring out what lies beneath the surface of that moderated mask.
These underlying behavioral combinations form the famous DISA, or disc matrix, which classifies personalities into 4 distinct colors: red, yellow, green, and blue. The system has been used in tens of millions of assessments worldwide. Now, most people, we're talking about 80%, are a combination of 2 colors. But to truly decode this system, we need to understand the fundamental single colors first.
Think about how this grid applies to the people in your own life. The vertical axis splits us between those who are intensely focused on tasks and results versus those who prioritize human relationships. The top half, all about getting things done and solving issues. The bottom half is focused on connection, understanding, and the social dynamics of the group.
Then, the horizontal axis divides us by energy. It separates the passive, reserved introverts on the left side from the highly active implementer extroverts on the right side. And when you combine these two axes, you get our 4 distinct color profiles.
This creates a really fascinating map of dominant traits. You have the analytical blue, who is cautious, structured, and super focused on organizing. You have the stable green, who's calm, supportive, and focused on connection. You've got the inspiring yellow, who is enthusiastic, spontaneous, and focused on involving others. And finally, you have the dominant red, who is quick, controlling, and entirely focused on direct action.
Okay, let's bring this theory to life. We're going to do a quick deep dive into spotting a red personality. If you want to recognize a true alpha, reds are literally impossible to miss. They speak the loudest, and they're always the first to answer questions. And notice how they view themselves. When they look in the mirror, they see a driven, resolute, ambitious, and highly independent pioneer. Their belief in their own ability is completely unsurpassed. They firmly believe they can achieve absolutely anything if they just work hard enough at it.
They are task-oriented extroverts, purpose-built for quick reactions and maximum control. They naturally step into leadership roles because they fearlessly take risks and are incredibly comfortable making rapid-fire decisions. If you have a red on your project team, they will fight tirelessly to push through obstacles long after everyone else has already thrown in the towel.
But there is a catch. Reds operate on a ruthless principle of slog or split. If a task has a clear purpose, they'll walk through fire to get it done, but if they feel a task has become humdrum or meaningless, they'll drop it in the trash instantly. They have absolutely zero interest in wasting energy on something they deem pointless.
To really understand this intensity, consider an incredible anecdote from our sources about a highly dynamic red CEO. Every spring, his company held a casual, friendly soccer tournament. Well, when this CEO stepped onto the field, his competitive drive completely took over. He turned this casual game into a ruthless, highly aggressive bloodbath. He was literally, physically flattening his own employees if they stood in his way to the goal.
When someone finally confronted him about playing way too rough, his justification was classic red. He just pointed at the event flyer and said, "Tournaments are competitions, and if you compete, you are in it to win." To a red, there is no such thing as a casual competition. This CEO competed in traffic. He raced to see how fast he could read a book, and get this, he even intimidated his 5-year-old kids in memory card games because he outright refused to lose.
For a red, time is literally money. Quick is entirely synonymous with good. Because they are such rapid thinkers, they will happily interrupt a sluggish meeting to force a decision. They'll be the one to say, "Hey, we've discussed this for 20 minutes. It's only a few million in investments. How hard can it be?" While everyone else is paralyzed by overanalysis, a red just wants to keep moving forward.
But here is the critical takeaway for your own day-to-day life. While a red's intense behavior can definitely irritate or intimidate you, it usually isn't malicious at all. They aren't trying to suppress you. When they give you blunt, totally polite, free feedback, they're just telling you the truth as they see it in the most direct way possible. You really can't take it personally. Just recognize the color for what it is.
By understanding these behavioral masks, whether you're dealing with an intense red, an inspiring yellow, a stable green, or an analytical blue, we can replace all that daily frustration with empathy and highly tailored communication. So, I leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. Based on the grid we just explored, what color is driving your behavior today?